Thanks for taking time to check out this video. It is a very long video. It is me working. It is an edited version of me working, and it is still long. So it raises questions over who would want to watch that. And I have concluded that for most people, they don't want to watch that. But if you're interested in certain things that I'm doing, you might want to check it out because you'll see how a professional software engineer would do it, and you get an idea about how much time it would take them, and you can also see what AI benefits AI is providing to them, or likewise not providing to them. I'm going to make more videos like this so that I can document how things are actually being used and whether or not AI is, in fact, taking the jobs of software developers or simply augmenting them. If you're a software engineer or a software engineering student, you might find this video valuable because you can see how I engage with others during a pull request where there are changes that are requested, but after I start trying to make them, start to realize it doesn't actually seem like a good idea and would just probably just make the code worse. Otherwise, if you're more of an executive type or you're just wanting to know, hey, what is the current state of AI, you don't really need to watch me go through things. In some cases, you might if you feel like you understand things, but then at the same time don't understand them and want to see what it looks like. That makes a lot of sense. Otherwise, I would say go and check out another video I'm going to put out, and it is going to be much shorter, and it's going to jump straight to the conclusions and everything. Another thing you can do is just start watching this video, and then when you're ready, just kind of skip to the end, and I just talk about the conclusions about what we saw. Thanks. Yesterday, I created a pull request, which is how software engineers suggest changes to code, and got some feedback from the maintainers. Basically, the feature I've been working on was adding a NoScript tag to these interactive web pages so that if someone visits the web page of JavaScript, instead of seeing a blank page, they see a message that says, go turn on JavaScript. They can also customize it so that if it's like a search engine indexer or something else, then it can see what the page is about without having to switch to a mode that forces it to interact with the page. I got some feedback on it, and that feedback says, rather than adding a parameter, which is what I did, that allows this functionality, why not allow someone to just create a function and then they can swap out the function? My opinion is that because this is a Python repository, it should follow general Python conventions, which is to be batteries included. Batteries included means that you don't have to go and write a bunch of stuff or find another library or something like that in order to get functionality that feels like it should just come out of the box. In my opinion, this should come out of the box because it's a common use case. So rather than arguing with the maintainer, I'm actually going to see if I can use AI to help provide a third opinion, and then we'll just go with whatever it says. Now, oftentimes when you submit a pull request, you're not going to get it merged in on first try anyways. So, for example, here we can see that the linter didn't run and automatically correct the code. So when the continuous integration checks went into place, they caught that the formatting wasn't what it wanted. So that's probably something to add to the developer container configuration, which is a different pull request that we worked on, so that that is done automatically and I don't have that problem anymore. When it comes to making these changes, GitHub actually allows you to reference the GitHub bot. It's not Cowork, it's Copilot. But unfortunately, apparently it's not available for cross-repository pull requests, which is how how most open source pull requests are done. You make your own fork, you make your changes, and then you do a pull request back to the main fork. So that's unfortunate. I understand how that might happen because of the billing questions about it. So rather than being able to just write a message and have the AI make changes for me, I need to actually go back into the editor, make my changes, push them to my fork, which will then be reflected in this pull request. Okay, so I've written a prompt for the AI. I told it about the disagreement that we're having, and I'm gonna see if Codex can make a decision and just change the code based off of that decision. I told them exactly what the maintainer said, and I advocated my case. I also asked it to run rough on utils.py so that it'll fix the linting issue. So let's see what happens. These changes sound kind of scary in terms of size, so hopefully it ends up writing something small. It's interesting to see it try to apply tools to make changes to the code and then being like, I don't have permission. Let me just elevate them. It seems like the running it without elevation kind of defeats the point if it's just going to turn around and escalate its own privileges. I wonder what the namespace restriction is. So now it says it hit an environment cork with the patch tool. This is rejected. See, I would love to help it. I don't know what's wrong. Oh, right, wrote a Perl script. Sure. I mean, it is creative for trying to hack its way through. I mean, I probably would have been like, let's just fix what's wrong with the environment. Yeah, that's weird. I didn't have this problem last time. Interesting. I wonder if it's got its own shell, and that shell, for some reason, is why it's having issues. You can see I'm mainly rubber stamping it. I don't even quite know what it's doing. I don't even see the full command. So it's trying to run PyTest, which if I remember correctly, you're supposed to use hatch. So you can quickly see how like the artificial intelligence is missing that sort of context. And so then it kind of just gets in this little narrow scope of trying to solve the problem within like what it's sort of trained to do. And I suspect what's going to happen is a lot of coding practices are going to change so that you essentially have people writing their code in a way that the AI just tends to naturally know how to handle it. Okay, so it looks like it decided it was done. So I'm going to stop it for a second so we can look at the code. All right, so we can look through these code changes. And it looks to me like the no script was dropped entirely. But I swear when it said what it was doing, it was going to give it the same default. So it's almost like someone with ADHD, like forgetting what they we're about to do. Let me see if I can get it to fix that. All right, so I'm going to ask it to double check that it actually still supports no script. And then I also wanted to check that it did the PyScript logic, because I'm only seeing standalone, and I do recall that the PyScript logic was basically a mirror. So it does make sense to, instead of having copies of code twice, is to have a reusable thing. So let's go ahead and ask it to do that. I'm curious though. Can I go back and see its message? It looks like it just says what it did. It's task history. That's the same one. I don't see an option to see what it said, because I swear it resolved the argument by saying that the default stand-in was going to have no script on it. It's like kind of the point of the pull request. So this is kind of the change that if I were, as a software developer, I'd be hesitant to make. There's a very common thing called scope creep, and it's when like a pull request for a simple change suddenly turns into this monster because you start over engineering the hell out of it. And it's sort of like you do it because you're like, next time we have to change this area, it'll be easier. But then like what ends up happening in reality is that you often don't change things very much. or likewise, like, oh, well now you just made the code harder to understand. Right? So it's not always a slam dunk decision to just go and refactor things again and again to make reusable parts. There's also often a slight performance overhead. Very slight, but if you're doing things millions of times, that actually does add up. I actually don't want it to run the smoke test, but I don't know what will happen if I say no. Makes me think it'll just try to find a different way to run it. All right, so let's see what it did. So here's the PyScript block. Oh, actually, hold on. Okay, so if we review the changes, it looks like it has a new function called HTML document, and that's under utils. Under PyScript, it has the same thing. And then we still have this default render here. So in one code path, we call parent and then pass itself in as part of React Py. Let's see, we also seem to have a test change here, but not a corresponding test change on PyScript. All right, so here it gets passed into React Py, but then under the PyScript one, which is a React Py, it does not. So that's an issue. Right, so you have this custom one, and then here it just seems to be hard-coded. So that's an issue. I still think the default renderer should take in a PyScript argument. or not PyScript, a no script argument. Because I'm pretty sure that's what the AI agreed on. So I guess lesson learned here is do the arguments outside of codex. Don't have codex make the decision because you'll lose it. Which is kind of what I feel what's happening is that I think it's losing its context, so it's forgetting why the whole point of the thing was in the first place. So I think the perhaps better technique here is to have the default doesn't do the no script, but then the library provides a function that does have no script in there and reads it from a file. And I think the HTML document default should also have a no script like from text. So you can kind of see how, like, working with AI on this, you quickly have to start imposing your opinions on it. And my experience using AI is that the more opinionated you are, the less you feel like it gives you leverage. So it's sort of like if you wanted it to just generate a picture of something and you go, oh, I just realized I'm not even recording the codex screen. Hold on. So the more opinionated you are, the more likely you're going to be like, hey, this thing's doing something wrong. If you asked it to generate a picture of, a person riding a unicorn, shooting a bow and arrow, and you have this image in your head about what it should look like, the AI is probably not going to guess that. But if you are not opinionated and you're like, yeah, this technically fits what I was looking for and that's good enough, then you might think AI is fantastic. And I suspect perhaps a lot of people in leadership positions, that's how they're used to seeing things, is that they had to drop their opinions on things because otherwise they were just micromanaging. So then they say AI saves a lot of time because they're used to telling someone what they want, getting something that looks nothing like it, and going, well, good enough. The difference here is that those people are professionals with experience and a lot of learned context about what's around them. And the AI here just isn't at that point. I could see it getting there eventually. But right now, it definitely has this really smart but kind of small memory problem. And I'm just going to call out, this is starting to get to the point where I could have written this myself and been close to done. So when people talk about gains with AI, this is starting to turn into a wash because I'm arguing with it. There's also overhead in just getting everything set up for it. So you can sort of understand how someone might have a very sour opinion if they were to spend a bunch of time setting it up and then they go and try it out with something and it's like, I don't know how to change this code very well. And then they're just like, all right, I guess AI still sucks. I do see an advantage to multitasking. So right now, I'm sitting here staring at the screen and I really don't have anything better to do. I could definitely see someone like pulling up their phone and getting on social media, and then when this thing finishes, they're not looking at it. They don't look at it until it's finally done. And this is actually a phenomenon I saw working, other places where it took a long time to like restart the server. So then you'd go pull up your phone and do all that because you had a whole minute to kill. So you have about 10 seconds before someone starts to get into that kind of habit. That's sort of like the developer experience thing that not me personally, but people have measured. And so it's sort of like once things start taking longer than 10 seconds, then you start to lose that focus and everything. And we're clearly doing that here. All right, let me review the changes. All right, so we're going to review the changes. We have our new HTML document that takes in the NoScript parameter, and we have this default NoScript body. So that's a good practice. It looks like it followed the convention of the document for docstrings, which is good. I would personally, I have a tendency, I should say, to do it my way. And if it's not none, okay. So you can override it to none, and then it'll not show it at all. Otherwise, or you can also override to an empty string, and it'll show nothing in there. So that looks good. And then this is a version that takes in a path. So you can swap that out. And if we look for the changes of this, it gets plugged in. I guess they have this default. So we take in an index HTML renderer. So it gave its own type. So it has to take in a React Pi object. Or it could, rather. So then now we have this question of, okay, should our custom renderer we're asking the user to provide, should it be knowing these kind of details? I don't think the answer is yes. So again, I now have to go tell the AI to make these changes if I'm doing AI only, which if I was vibe coding, this would probably start to get a bit frustrating. And I wouldn't recognize this, to be honest. Otherwise, because I think it should just be HTML document, right? And so the problem this has is that the default is here. I think this should actually return a function. All right, so let's go ahead and get these changes. So update render HTML index email so that it does not take in a React Pi object. You can accomplish this by we could have a function that returns a function. And if we go back to HTML document, it really is just a string at the end of the day. Like I guess the question is, why make this a function at all? If it's a function, that makes sense from a callback perspective. Otherwise, it should just be a string. That gives the user most flexibility. Oh, I see. This one. See, now this is confusing because they don't have the same parameters. So like each one of these things is like operating off of its own different context, and this is not a good way of writing this. This kind of goes into my philosophy for doing pull requests. At least prior to AI, I always had this view that don't create work. So it's sort of like if things are fine with the old pull request and the way it is, like try to like ask for changes. Don't ask for changes that don't need to be there. Because stuff like this can happen, where you start getting into this philosophical way of solving the problem, which then turns into a debate, which then eats up a bunch of time, and it's sort of like it wasn't really necessary. You know, I don't have a laundry list of things that I want to do with this renderer. It just needs to do one thing because it's a common use case for anything that's internet facing. So I'm going to say that I hit my time box that I've allocated to this for making this change. I don't feel very strongly about it. I do feel that it does need to have the no script feature. And this is very common, is that someone requests something and they don't really go through and think through all like the implications of it. My opinion is that trying to make this more reusable overly complicates it and over engineers it. I think what I had was fine. So what I'm going to do is just simply make the small changes that that help clean it up. That's it. All right, so I made my changes by hand, and now I'm going to have AI make sure that the tests are appropriately updated. So I'm just asking that it just goes and checks that tests have been updated appropriately. It says the sandbox is blocking even basic repo inspection. Again, I don't know what it's talking about. What is kind of nice is that it seems to be building its own context by looking at how the files changed and inferring what the intent of the changes were. So I didn't need to explain that the old case was path only and the new case supports taking in a string body. No. Tell codecs what to do differently. Let's try that. Wait, I thought I... Skip, maybe? Like, just change the code. Okay. Suggested text test additions. So please make those test changes. This is rejected. Default permissions. So this must be that sandbox thing, but I mean, it seems like basic changes are not permitted. So what is... I'm confused here. And it works around it anyways. So I'm wondering if the issue is that this is running as a different user. And because it's running as a different user, it doesn't have permissions to touch everything that's using the code space user. And that must be what this default permissions versus full access is. So because, I mean, a code space is essentially a sandboxed environment. With some minor exceptions, like I believe there's like some keys hidden in the environment itself that I wouldn't expect AI to aggressively go out and try to steal and email it to me, email it to someone. And actually, I think this is what happened last time, is that it asks to run things outside the sandbox, but it looks like for some reason it's trying to run tools. Yeah, but the tool should have the same permissions it does. That doesn't make any sense. So what I find a bit interesting is that it looks like the environment doesn't run tests anymore. So recall that in the prior video, I spent time setting that up, setting up the dev container configuration and all that. This is the same code space. I haven't undone anything. And yet it seems to no longer be working as expected. So these are one of the things that when you make a dev container, you have to work through and make sure that it is all buttoned up and everything so that people don't have this issue. If there's a product out there that uses AI to do this automatically, it's would be valuable. for sure. So this is what we want to test and make sure that this works. So okay, so that one says default, and that's tested. If we go to standalone, oh, we have a divergence here. See, that wasn't cleaned up. So if we go to standalone right here, and then let's go ahead and have the AI write a test for that. It's good to have that default be on the class that's exposed to the user, because then the user can clearly see where it comes from and knows how to change it. If it was buried deeper into the mechanics of how this thing renders, then the user would have to dig into the code of the library to understand where that came from. All right, so it says it made the change. Okay, where did it make the change? Enable JavaScript to, yeah, it doesn't say it. It literally says it made the change. So right here it says it now asserts this, but then when you actually look at the changes, it still is checking to see it's omitted. It's missing. So again, it looks to me like it's not actually making the changes. Well, that's frustrating. I guess I always have to manually do this. All right, so I pushed the changes with the fixed formatting and the updated tests. It looks like everything's passing. It's just running it for different versions of operating systems, but these other ones pass. So I don't expect that to be an issue. It did reveal that the dev container would need to have the formatting updated to match what this is expecting. And it also revealed that there's something wrong with the setup because for whatever reason it didn't persist. It just kind of goes to show like how also one simple suggestion can sort of snowball, right? So when you talk about like velocity in a team of people versus one person, when you have a team of people, this kind of thing happens all the time. Someone looks at it, they go, oh, it could be this or that. And then, you know, if you even notice, there's not even like a direction, right? It is you could do this. I didn't tell you to do it. I didn't say I wanted it. I just said you could do it. So then I'm left to interpret what you are implying by that, which I interpret as an instruction to go do it. So coming back and saying like, no, at the very least I can say I put effort into it and I think the answer is no, and then I give my reason no, which is that it just makes it complex and I don't really actually see a use case for what you're describing. I think it would mislead people by trying to do things a different way. So that took about 2 hours. So you can understand how, again, one person who doesn't have to like listen to other people making suggestions is in charge of their own decisions and can quickly like go down a path and be like, actually, never mind, and not have to explain it to anyone. You know, they have a huge velocity advantage. One of the things worth calling out is that when the AI had undone the changes in that branch, it turns out that I wasn't even operating on the correct branch. I didn't realize it. And because I didn't have that visibility into the code, it wasn't as obvious. I would have to have noticed that in the lower left-hand corner that I had switched back to the dev container branch that I had also worked on, but was missing these no-script changes that were on the no-script branch. So AI had this confusing situation and it just sort of plowed forward through it rather than being like, are you sure you're not on the right branch? Had I worked on the code myself, I would have immediately recognized that the no script changes were missing and I was on the incorrect branch. Alright, so how did AI help us here? Well, when it was given a set of changes, it was able to write tests for those changes, and they weren't terrible. Okay, so where did AI fall short? Well, first, it masked the fact that I was using the wrong branch, resulting in a lot of confusing behavior and changes that might not have been. It was also brute forcing a lot of environment issues and tried to run tests its own way rather than trying to do it the correct way. And this resulted in me waiting a lot of time and also it burning through a lot of tokens. Finally, which was supposed to be the central experiment of this whole thing, I don't really trust that it did any reasoning, and it just seemed like it looked at our diverging opinions and suggested what I would call a compromise. So, based on what we saw today, is AI taking your job? So, I'm highly skeptical that AI is going to be trained to abandon work that no longer seems like a good idea. That seems like a very, very large surface area to try to solve, and so I don't see that being automated. I guess, in fairness, a lot of existing software engineers have the same problem. They don't want to throw away their work. I also needed to babysit the test changes. It kept on coming up short when it came to tests. Finally, a pattern I'm starting to see is that it kind of struggles with names, in particular. Like when it's doing refactors on its own code, it seems to be hesitant to rename things. So it's sort of like it can't tell the difference between renaming something that is brand new and is perfectly okay to rename and renaming something that's been around for a while and is probably a little more dangerous to rename. Perhaps one way of phrasing it is that its behavior seems a little time blind.